welcome to the call, everybody. We'll give it a minute or two before we kick off. Morning to you, Paul, as well. If anybody else wants to say hello and where you're coming in from in the chat, please feel free. And you're on. Morning, Paddy. Good to see you again. Julian, SE Public Sector, like that. Okay, fantastic. The numbers are starting to slowly steady in terms of numbers of joinees, so we will crack on. So firstly and foremost, thank you for taking the time out with Palo Alto Networks again. We're here at the second episode of the Back to the Future series, where we're going to talk through, Sean, if you want to move on to the next slide, we're going to talk through SaaS inline security. So how do we do SaaS application control? So we're going to build on a little bit of what Nimesh talked about last week, which is App ID. But SaaS presents some different problems, and Sean Taylor is going to walk you through some of the unique challenges that we solve with SaaS Inline. And look, this content is created by practitioners for practitioners. I said this last week. It's kind of technical in nature in order to empower you guys as practitioners and sellers and partners and customers within your environments to make informed decision. And we welcome all questions. Look, challenge the panel. We like to be challenged. We like to have difficult questions. That's kind of what we're all here for. Obviously, next week we're gonna move on to a slightly different topic on IPS and broadly threat prevention, how it's evolved, and where it started from to where it's going to, and how we need to change the way we behave. We took some feedback from last week's session as well in the survey. So just to give you some idea of what's coming up. So we have a DLP session scheduled. So somebody asked for DLP. The BPA, best practice assessments, we're going to touch on that in the AI ops section with Matt Smith on June the 21st. So if you're interested in best practices, then I definitely recommend you join with Matt on the 21st. And there was a final request for Prisma. So we can cover Prisma there, but probably not in this series of workshops. So we'll set up a separate Prisma Access workshop where we can deep dive into what it is, and we can chunk that up into little bite-sized pieces. So moving on to the next slide, please, Sean. We are looking at the quiz. So we're aware of some issues last week with the quiz, but we still run it, and I'll have a call for honesty in a moment. But you can join this week's quiz using this QR code. It will reappear many times. So if you don't catch it now, don't worry. This will be up again in a moment towards the end of the presentation. And also when we join the quiz, when you're registering, take a picture of this, join the quiz, join in, have some fun. There are prizes, and we will get into announcing the winners in a moment. So next slide, please, Sean. So honesty, the reason I call for honesty is we didn't capture your proper names. We started the quiz a little bit too quickly, so the proper names couldn't be entered. So if you can remember what your player name was from last week and you appear in the winners list, can you put your email or your name into the chat and your position where you think you came based on these results? But in third place was Frosty. So congratulations, Frosty. There'll be a voucher winging its way to you. Second place was Ribbit. Congratulations, Ribbit. And then first place was Dragonite. So if you can remember who you were, please either send me an email, cmonday@paloaltonetworks.com, put your details in the chat, however you would prefer to do it, and the name of which you played under, please. Obviously, if we get a clash, then we might have to call this one void, and we'll figure out another way of running this competition. but we will give you enough time this time to put your full details in. All right, fantastic. So moving on to the next slide, please, Sean. So I'll introduce Sean now. He's our technical specialist for DLP and SaaS, and he's going to run you through a whole bundle of great content about SaaS Inline security. So really, Sean, over to you.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm going to cover a few products within this one session, but really focus on the visibility and control side of things when we talk about SaaS applications, especially when we see how many new SaaS apps are coming to the marketplace on basically a daily basis. It's really hard for organizations to keep up. It probably comes as no surprise to everybody that the world's changed, and not just since COVID. So COVID made a big impact on how we all worked. More and more people are using tools such as Teams and Zoom now. But even if you go back before that, and those that are old enough to remember it, so you go back 20 odd years, your 9-to-5 job was actually a 9-to-5 job. You would go into an office, you would work at your machine with your monitor and your big brick of a PC, typically thick clients or some thin client software on there to do your job, and creation of documents was really straightforward. You'd create it on your endpoints, you'd save it either locally or a network share, and then email that out. So when we think of SaaS apps, there wasn't really a lot to use. Even when the mobile phones came out, it was still very much just text message and phone calls, very basic. And then all of a sudden it changed, and we can't even say gradually. It was almost an explosion straight away. One came out, and then all of a sudden you was inundated with a lot of these apps, thinking of Facebook and Twitter as examples. And that caused a big problem for enterprises. So if you think about who you work for today and go back to when you joined your organization, you might think of that contract that you signed, but can you remember the acceptable use policies around applications to do your job? Can you remember the acceptable use policies for internet usage and email usage? And when I ask that question to a lot of people, the answer is typically no. No, I can't remember the list. I can't remember what we can use. I can use the internet. That was about it. But I can't remember the sanctioned apps. You just assume everything on that device that you're given is what you can use. And we start to use other apps. We start to use things like Signal and WhatsApp and Telegraph because colleagues use them, or other companies that we're doing business with are using those applications as well. And because it's an easy way to communicate, we use them. But then unfortunately, we start to send data or sensitive information across those apps, and enterprises lose that visibility. And that's critical for them to stay compliant, making sure that sensitive data is not going over these unsanctioned applications. Then if we look at collaboration apps, I'm sure everyone's using Slack or Teams of some sort. That's changed in itself. So even though when you think of Microsoft Skype was probably the first example, we use that to talk, we'd send messages and we do the video calls, but it's kind of exploded to the point now where Zoom and Teams are being used for much more. We are using them to chat with our colleagues to see what time we're going for lunch. But we're also talking for teams of people about customers, about projects. Some might be some simple questions to ask. But before you know it, if you look back in those chat messages and the history, there's probably combined a lot of sensitive information within that chat channel. And it's really important to get visibility into those to see what users are doing. We're not even talking about kind of personal devices. That's a whole new subject in itself. But when we think of the SaaS apps themselves being used from any device, potentially from any location, it's really, really critical to get an understanding of what's being used and how it's being used. These are some examples of what I like to talk about, not necessarily through malicious use, but also misconfiguration of SaaS apps. So when we talk about securing the data, for Palo Alto, we have a few products put together, which makes up our next-gen CASB. One of them elements is to secure the applications themselves. This actually reduces the risk of this problem that you see on the screen. Data has been exfiltrated, not through potentially a malicious insider, but because the app itself wasn't secured down. So things like MFA wasn't enabled, or even locking down to specific IP for access isn't enabled. So this sensitive information has managed to be exfiltrated by the bad guys. And they've made it easier just by not securing those settings within the SaaS apps. When companies look at SaaS applications, it's not just your sanctioned apps. They have to take into consideration unsanctioned applications, tolerated applications. And what's causing a big problem here is us. It's us users. When we, again, look at doing projects, we might use an app for that project. A lot of enterprises will have different units within there that may even subscribe to their own tenant of Office to do something. They may subscribe to Dropbox to start sharing files with their contractors or third parties. When you think of mergers and acquisition departments, they again may use different software. They may sign up to an enterprise agreement, but IT are not getting visibility of this because they're not being told about these applications. So one of the key things we've seen now that a lot of companies are focusing on is shadow IT. How do I know which of my applications, or what applications in general, are being used by my employees? And then separating it out into sanctioned, unsanctioned, and tolerated, so they can decide if it does fall under personal use. If it's Gmail, are you going to allow personal Gmail? And if you are, do you want to control what data can be sent to Gmail? If it's an enterprise app, again, do you want to control access to those apps? Do you want to allow uploads and downloads and sharing of files from unsanctioned devices, if from bring your own device, or if it's from locations that you don't trust? So again, but having visibility into those apps is the priority. We're also seeing that a lot of companies now are spending around 50% of their budget on shadow IT. It's a big, big problem. And the fact that companies are focusing on this really shows the issue that they have around shadow IT. So a couple of statistics, and I've just seen out the corner of my eye, there's a question coming in the normal chat, not the Q&A. So if you do have any questions, can you please put them in the Q&A, because then there's a panelist there being able to answer those questions for you. But one's just come in the normal chat, Chris. I don't know if someone wants to grab that. But from the stats, these are the numbers I like talking to customers about. So 323 is the average amount of SaaS applications that organizations have. And that's average. So that's not the lowest or the highest, but it's on average. 27, and I can't ask you to guess because everyone's on mute, but 27 is the percentage of those apps that are covered by IT. And that's a really low number. And when we speak to CISOs, they're really saying that this number is inadequate. It has to be a lot higher, but they don't have the tool set to either understand the applications or to control those applications. A lot of traditional CASB products are kind of limited in this space. So questions that we normally get from the InfoSec teams are really focused around these 5 pillars. The first one being, how do I know my SaaS apps are secure? And it kind of leads into the second question, which is really important. You can't understand if your SaaS apps are secure if you don't know what your SaaS apps are. So with the securing of the SaaS apps, it's really coming down to the configurations of those SaaS apps, making sure that those security settings like MFA are enabled. Looking at the visibility is a key part of this. Then how can we protect the data in the cloud? This moves us on to a separate component of our next-gen CASB. So it's not the SaaS Inline, which I'm talking about today, but protecting the data in the cloud or data at rest is all about using an API connector. So traditional CASB that a lot of people really think of, that was kind of created by Gartner back in 2016. And protecting that is onboarding your sanctioned applications, your Office 365, your Dropboxes, your Salesforces, and adding them into a system that can constantly scan that data and also user activity. So we can see what your users are doing, if they're mass downloading, mass uploading. And that falls into kind of how do you make sure it's safe across that fragmented vendor space with a small team. You don't want multiple dashboards and limited teams to be able to investigate this. So we actually make it very simple. Through one single dashboard, you can see the applications, you can control the applications, and you can secure them. From a threat perspective, sorry, I clicked next too quick. From a threat perspective, we always integrate with Wildfire. If you're not familiar what Wildfire is, I do know there's a session coming up either next week or in a few weeks' time that can focus on that in more detail. But our Wildfire is really a cloud-based tenant that does sandboxing. And we leverage that with our CASB solutions to be able to constantly check those documents, make sure there's no malicious content or bad data in there that's going to cause harm to your organization. So what does that look like from our perspective? Well, in the middle, we've got the next gen CASB. That's our terminology for a collection of tools that really enhances your data privacy and data security. So SaaS Inline is a key one that we're talking about today. We have SaaS API. SaaS API is our cloud-based tenant, which uses API connectors to connect to the likes of your OneDrive, your Salesforce, your Dropbox, etc., to constantly scan for your data at rest and also your user activities. We then have SSPM, so SaaS Security Posture Management. That does exactly the same kind of with APIs. The difference being with SSPM, we're looking at misconfigurations. We're not focusing on the data. We're looking at securing that application. Today, we have close to 100 applications supported. So if that's something of interest, you can look online and see how we can assist you there. Then lastly, DLP plays a really key part of CASB. And we do have a session coming up in a few weeks' time with Alex, who's going to go into DLP in more detail. But from the CASB point of view, the elements I want to focus on today is SaaS Inline, all about shadow IT, getting you that visibility into those applications that your users are using. It's classed as a subscription service. So that means we can enable this on our next-gen firewalls and within our SASE platform with Prisma Access. So enabling it gives you access to more app IDs, and the Mesh touched on app IDs last week, but I'll explain the difference in a second. And it also gives you control of those applications. So rather than just having a list that says, these are the apps, this is everything your users have accessed, we add that extra level of control by integrating with our firewalls and Prisma Access. We can leverage them as the enforcement point and start taking control almost straight away. And that's an added benefit that some solutions out there today don't offer. So we focus on monitoring all of that SaaS usage. We are going to give you 100% visibility into your user's activity and those applications. We're then going to secure the apps with SSPM to make sure those misconfigurations don't happen, and constantly inspecting the user activity and the documents to make sure that there's no malicious content or malicious kind of insiders with the behavior that may be a trait to something that's bad is about to happen. So on the app ID side of things, Mesh covered it last week. We're looking at the left side of the screen. So we've got the applications. The traditional app IDs would focus on applications that may have characteristics that can be evasive or have vulnerabilities in there, apps that you may be able to use to tunnel additional applications. When we think of SaaS apps, they're purely cloud-based applications. So we don't focus on that kind of vulnerabilities, misuse scenarios. We're looking at other settings to rate these applications. So with app IDs normally scoring from 1 to 5, with SaaS apps, we use an ACE engine, which is based on kind of app ID technology, but we score from 1 to 10. The main difference is with SaaS apps, you will see that compliance regulations and frameworks will play a big part in that scoring. So if one app has SOC 1, SOC 2, ISO 27001, their scoring might potentially go up towards the good area between the 1s, the 2s, and the 3s. If they don't have things like MFA or IP restrictions or SAML, then their scoring could potentially go down towards the 10s. Now, we do that based on our team. So same bunch of people that are analyzing these SaaS applications are providing this scoring with a lot of ML in the back end as well, because let's be honest, the overhead to rate and score all of the apps available is just not possible by a human team. So ML is used a lot in the back end to do this scoring for us. As soon as we see a new app, it's updated. So if you've already got the subscription with SaaS Inline, you will have access to the new applications that are pushed as part of ACE. This is an example of a panorama dashboard. So in there, you can see we've got 808 SaaS apps. This is an oldish screenshot. I actually don't know when this was taken, but I don't think it was that long ago. But with all the 4,000 plus apps that we support, with app IDs, you're only seeing 808, which does sound like a lot. But when you compare it to when SaaS Inline is enabled using the ACE engine, we enhance that. That's stating 50,000 today. However, we are in the 67,000 area range and constantly going up. So that gives you an extra benefit into these applications where you may have seen just web dash browsing before. So when Nimesh covered on the ports typically hitting a firewall, locking it down based on ports, now you can use app IDs. We can even take it further. So rather than inspecting traffic just as web browsing, you might now be able to see applications that are categorized as a SaaS app and their relevant controls as well. So within the SaaS app, we can give you the name and then also the uploading, the downloading, the sharing, the delete, the personal account access. So it's very granular controls that you can place within your firewalls or Prisma Access to be able to control these. So what does it look like at a very high level? Well, SaaS Inline, as I've mentioned, is a subscription that you can purchase on a 1, 2, 3, I think even further if you like, a year basis. It's only supportable on physical next-gen firewalls and Prisma Access. We recommend that you're running 10.1 or above. So even though traditionally SaaS Inline can run on 9.x, that will only give you visibility. So it is supported on 9.x, but that means we can only integrate with Cortex Data Lake for the reporting, which kind of gives you the screen in the bottom right of the corner. If you're running 10.1 or above, we add the extra benefit of control. So we can use the dashboard to show you the applications being used and then also instantly take control of those applications. But that does require the PanOS version of 10.1. One thing that's not showing on this slide is Cortex Data Lake, which I've just mentioned. We do have a requirement on CDL. If you've already purchased CDL, we can leverage your existing CDL. If you haven't got CDL, you would need to purchase CDL for this to work. The reason for that is the visibility side of SaaS Inline is simply connecting to CDL to retrieve those logs, all that activity information around HTTP traffic. Without that, we can't generate the logs. This is actually an added benefit for us. Because it's all seamlessly integrated, there's no downtime. Some solutions that give you the shadow IT reporting, they rely on things like log imports through syslog or another mechanism. So you have to take your proxy logs or your firewall logs and manually import them into the solution to generate the report. So we don't have that. We don't rely on third-party systems, which reduces the potential downtime and loss of visibility into this. It's extremely seamless. When you enable SaaS Inline, you've got a couple of regions to choose from. So for EMEA, we currently support Frankfurt or the UK. So you can decide where your tenant is going to reside from a data residency point of view, and all of the processing would be within that tenant. If you've already got something set up, such as CDL, and it's based in the UK, we always just recommend just choose the same area. Adding on to SaaS Inline, very briefly, we talk about at rest. So this is where we have, and hopefully you can see the mouse moving around, we have the SaaS Security API. The added benefit here is we're seeing all of the traffic go through your firewalls or Prisma Access. But if a user tries to bypass that by, let's say, uploading a sensitive document at home, SaaS API, this is where this kicks in and gives you the visibility. Doesn't rely on physical hardware or Prisma Access. but instead would be an API connector from our tenant, again, based in Frankfurt or in the UK, directly to your Office applications, such as Box, Salesforce, or Office. So when a user uploads a file, SaaS API is instantly going to scan that file, use the same malware prevention, such as Wildfire, to scan for any content, and give you a verdict that you can take control of. So you can have a block, quarantine, remove, there's different actions that you can take. So having that inline side of things with SaaS Inline gives you the visibility into the SaaS apps that all of your users are using and the control over those apps, along with DLP, but again, that's for Alex in a few weeks' time. We then talk about the ML-based detection. So this is Wildfire. This is completely included with SaaS API. And if you do have enabled on your next-gen firewalls or Prisma Access, we can also leverage it there as well. So in addition to the visibility, you can have the prevention functionality as well. I was planning on doing a demo, but my look of demos hasn't been great just recently. So I've decided to stick to screenshots instead. So this is a screenshot of what we call our cloud manager. So if you're using Prisma Access, you may be familiar with that black bar down the side, may look familiar to you. SaaS security now is really a key part of SASE. So when we talk about SASE and zero trust architecture, CASB is a key element of that. So the decision to include the dashboard into the Cloud Manager portal was really a no-brainer. Now, if you aren't using SASE and you are purely Panorama with physical firewalls on premise, don't worry, you too can still access this dashboard. This is the main go-to dashboard for everything around CASB. The main difference is a lot of these controls here, like URL and anti-tag, for example, they won't appear. This would be limited based on what licenses you have. But the dashboard initially is split into multiple sections. With the SaaS Inline, the data discovery, with the applications, we can show you those high-risk apps. So if you can remember, I talked about we rate our applications from 1 to 10. Anything that's 10, 9, and 8 is typically high. 1, 2, and 3 is low, and anything in the middle is medium. So we visually give you an insight into those high-risk applications straight away. You can drill into that. You can select any of these options, go into all of those applications. You can start tagging them as sanctioned or trusted or unsanctioned, and that can replicate into policy to potentially take action on those apps. You can go in, you can see more information about compliance status, user usage, and data usage as well. Now, this is a list of around 67,000 applications today. And again, as I've mentioned, constantly growing on top of the traditional app IDs. So these are screenshots that I took just to walk through a typical scenario. I've chosen Facebook here, but looking at the initial dashboard, I can see that the top 10 apps, we can see Facebook has a significant amount of usage compared to the other applications. In this case, Gmail could be my corporate mail. So the fact that we've got 601 meg compared to the 22 means that people are being more productive on Facebook than they are Gmail. So we can drill into this. So I've clicked on Facebook, takes me straight in. I can see how many users are actually leveraging Facebook, how much data has been uploaded and what's being shared. I can see information about Facebook, where they're headquartered, user count, the URL, etc. Further down shows me that compliance and security status. So if they support MFL, if they support SAML, IP-based restrictions, if they've got SOC 1, SOC 2, 27001, all of that is shown in this dashboard at the bottom. The reason I've paused on this screen is that we can see across the top, we get the application type, so it's categorized into collaboration and productivity. We can see the risk score, and we can see this is actually tagged as sanctioned. Now, I could, in the dashboard, manually change the risk score. It's very easy for me to change that 5 to a 1 or a 10. But we've got 67,000 apps, and we don't want to change them manually unless someone wants to create a job for themselves. So this is where we can click on Configure Global Risk Score. Global Risk Score, I think I've got a screenshot. No, I haven't. I do apologize. Would basically come up with a screen that would list all of those compliance frameworks, would list the security and privacy settings. And you can rate them based on your corporate appetite to the risk. So if you only want to work with applications that have got SOC 2, you can elevate the score in SOC 2. When you save this, it will automatically analyze all of the applications, and within about 2 minutes, any application that's got SOC 2, their score will start to go up. It will go towards the green area, unless it's already there. Any applications that don't have SOC 2 would be reduced, because based on your appetite to risk, you're stating that SOC 2 is very important. You can choose that on any of the application, on any of the settings, the frameworks and the security settings. We're also looking at this application. You know, we've seen Facebook, there's 2 users. I might want to block Facebook. So when I talked about the difference between PanOS 9 and PanOS 10, 9 gives you the visibility, you'd be able to see all of this. With 10.1, we have the ability to block. So straight away, if I don't want my users accessing Facebook, clicking on block access would automatically push Facebook into what we call a policy recommendation. Now, the policy recommendation then would list Facebook under here and automatically sync with Panorama and Cloud Manager. And this is a key element, because when we think of the bigger picture, CASB is really a decision engine. So if you're familiar with Zero Trust, we are the decision point. We're leveraging the existing infrastructure of firewalls and Prisma Access as the enforcement point. So these policy recommendations, when they're synced, it would look something like this in Cloud Manager. You would see the policy at the top, block access. We can see it's a recommendation from SaaS Security, and we can automatically sync those applications into a policy and block instantaneously. Now, out of the box, we have, I think, about 5 policy recommendations. There could be block access, block sharing, block like personal account access, for example. So you can start to then define what action you want to take on those. We can go a little bit further. So if you're familiar with Panorama and security policies, once you've enabled SaaS Inline, you can leverage the SaaS IDs and the controls within there, such as upload and download and sharing, as we can see here with these little icons, and create custom policies. Or if you're familiar with Prisma Access and Cloud Manager, we can do exactly the same with web access policies. We can base it on region, IP location, AD user group. The application itself, we can go down into. So Gmail, as an example, we can allow or block personal account access to Gmail. We could block the video call option of Gmail, or phone call, or upload or download. And then we can apply DLP to that as well. So restricting the application at a control level, again, requires 10.1, but then applying DLP, which Alex will discuss. So how does the flow of SaaS work? Well, as an administrator sitting here in the top left, you have that dashboard in front of you. You can see all of the applications that have been used. That's come from Cortex Data Lake. So if we take it back into the center with your physical firewalls and Prisma Access, anytime users are accessing these applications, the traffic is being logged. It's being recorded into CDL. We import that into SaaS Inline and put that into the dashboard that the administrators can see. Now, that's not real time. Today, we update that roughly once a day around midnight, the local time of the tenant that you've chosen. So if you've chosen the UK, it's midnight in the UK. Frankfurt, midnight Frankfurt. From a control point of view, when you make those decisions and you create those policies, they're in this policy recommendation engine. They're synced to Panorama and Cloud Manager, which in turn pushes to your physical hardware or to Prisma Access. So that policy and that control takes effect almost instantaneously. So all of those endpoints and all of your mobile users using Global Protect that are coming through these perimeter security will have this traffic inspected and enforced. You can then also decide, if, as I mentioned, if you want to tag these apps. So if it's an application that you've signed up to or an ELA that you've got an agreement with, such as Office or G Suite, you can tag them as sanctioned. And again, in the policy recommendations, we can look at all of those sanctioned applications. Tolerated apps, in case there's a few people wondering what's tolerated. If I use Palo Alto as a great example, we are G Suite and we use Zoom, but there's some customers that would only use Microsoft Teams. So when we use Teams to do those calls, that's tolerated. It's not a business application, but our organization tolerates that for us to be able to do business. So that's an example of a tolerated app. Unsanctioned, I'm sure everyone's aware, it's apps that you don't want access to. With that, I've actually put ChatGPT because this is a big discussion area at the moment. I've placed it in the unsanctioned area because in my mind, a lot of customers are already seeing the bads that ChatGPT could potentially do without seeing some of the good that it can also do. And the majority of customers I've spoken to are already saying that ChatGPT needs to be blocked. So that's why I've placed it in the unsanctioned area. I would be interested in your opinion, but no one can talk. So on that, think to yourself, where would you actually place this? If you saw ChatGPT as an application being used by your users, how would you deal with the risk associated with ChatGPT? Would you just want to block that? Would there be certain controls that you can block? So one of the things that we can do, and I don't want to take too much from Alex's session, but when we talk about traffic inspection from a visibility point of view, we don't need SSL decryption for this. So to get the visibility, you don't need to have SSL decryption switched on. If you do have it enabled, then we can start controlling. So the app ID controls like sharing and downloading and DLP, they do require SSL decryption for that to work. And where I was going with that is we also do DLP on HTTP put and post. So one scenario with ChatGPT is having the visibility into ChatGPT with SaaS Inline, but then controlling what's placed into that chat. So if someone has tried to copy PII data into ChatGPT, we could inspect that, identify the PII data, and then block. So coming on to my last slide, I'm just doing a quick time check. This is something we use when we talk about zero trust at a very high level. Again, it really highlights where SaaS Inline is available. So if you've got headquarters or remote branches that are using physical firewalls, CASB has the SaaS Inline and DLP inline elements. Because remember, CASB isn't just SaaS Inline, it's SaaS Inline, DLP, SaaS API, and SSPM. But from a physical firewall point of view, the only elements that can be enabled from a subscription point of view are SaaS Inline and DLP Inline. So with these enabled, again, hardware requirements and version requirements of 10.1 really to get major benefit, we become this decision point. We don't take any action as a subscription service. We simply inspect that traffic, create the policies, and give you the option to allow next-gen firewalls to enforce. That's why we've got a little icon here that they are the enforcement points as part of a zero trust architecture. Same again with Prisma Access. Again, Prisma Access is the enforcement point. CASB, SaaS Inline, and DLP can be activated within SASE, Prisma Access, and they would be the decision point. The rest of the CASB elements is cloud service. That's why it's over here in the big cloud. So that's where we can connect SaaS API, DLP for SaaS API. So DLP was data at rest, and SSPM, and we also have Wildfire. So with that, I've actually come to the end of my presentation. So Chris, I'm going to get ready to pass back over to you, sir. I hope everyone found that valuable. And so here we go. So thank you very much, Chris.
All right, thanks, Sean, so much for running through that content. If you have any questions on the from the participants, please send them into the panel, and we'll get them answered. But in summary, right, so we see that App ID was good for controlling applications, but the proliferation of SaaS apps just provides a completely different landscape, which traditionally would show up as web browsing. So now we have the ability to automatically discover and control those SaaS applications, but also give you compliance reporting against those apps as well. So you can make some more informed decisions about how you want to run and operate the business, and particularly for the discovery of shadow IT. So on to the call to action. So there's a couple of things we can do. Oh, sorry, Sean. Next one, please.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Apologies.
Okay, so we can do the security lifecycle review. This is a free evaluation where you can put this a device inline and look at the traffic going through your network. And if you're an existing Palo Alto customer or you have an SLR in place, we can request a free trial of SaaS Security, scan the QR code and request your free trial. And this will be installed on your existing firewall appliances to see what you can see and give you access to the dashboard. Okay, for those that are not customers, probably on to the next slide, Sean. We've got a survey at the end of this session. And in there, if you would like a full demo, a complete demo of SaaS Security, or if you would like to talk to somebody in the sales team, just add your details in the survey, and particularly contact details, email address, and who you would like to speak to, or whether you would like a demo, and we can work with the respective sales teams in your geography to line that up. So without further ado, that takes me to the next slide, which is, sorry, mate, talking about next week. So next week we have Stamatis talking about the evolution of IPS. So how IPS has changed and how we need to continue to evolve IPS, but actually it's a bit broader than just IPS. It's looking actually at threat in general. And then the following week, we'll build on that, looking at sandboxing in much more detail. And how do we get in front of things like 0 days? So to tune into that one, it'll be interesting. Stam is a bit of a character, that's for sure. So, and then onwards, we're going to move into the quiz. So if you want to stop the share, Sean, and hopefully this will go without a hitch like last week, we will share the quiz. So I know not everybody got registered for the quiz, so please sign in. If you have issues, let me know in the chat. Take your time to register. If you can put in the chat whether you've managed to register with your proper name, the name that you've joined this webinar on, or something we can work that out from. That will help us next week actually have the proper participants on the quiz. Okay, chat. Does that mean nobody's registered? Just have the thumbs up. Okay, cool. Thumbs up page. Okay, let's move to the next slide then. So you should be able to enter your name right now. Let me know if you can't. If not, we'll have to do it on the trust basis like we did it last week. Can you add a name now, team? Anybody let me know? Fantastic. No, Deepak, you have. Christopher, you haven't. All right, we'll give this a few minutes. Does anybody else having issues registering a name? Code. There's the code 83342454. Okay. Just give it another couple of minutes. Make sure everybody can get in with the names. Okay, Christopher, you're sorted, which is good. Keep seeing the numbers going up and down, so I'm presuming people are struggling to get their details in. There's a few more people joining. All right, we seem to be steady at around 51, 52 players. Okay, brilliant. Do we think that's enough time? Can anybody in the chat give me a thumbs up or let me know if you've had enough time to register properly? All right, brilliant. Thanks, Bruno. We shall crack on. So question 1, we shall move on. Okay. So we'll display the results. The result of the quiz will be held at the end, so you won't know who's won. We'll announce the winners next week. But what happened to question 1? Okay, away we go. All right, SaaS Inline is a subscription available on which the following? All right, fantastic. 27 of you got that right. You were paying attention. Well done. Congratulations. Let's move on. So let's see who's winning right now. Oh, it's tight at the top, but Thomas, good effort. Well done. Okay, moving on to the next question. Are you ready? True or false? ACE ID is an extension of App ID. ACE is App ID configuration engine, if I'm not wrong, Sean.
Yeah, App ID Cloud Engine.
Cloud engine, sorry. All right, I should know better. Shame on me. Congratulations, 38 of you got that right. Especially as I saw Catherine answer the question in the chat. So congrats to you, 38. So let's have a look at the leaderboard. What did this do? Dorotheus. Congratulations, that was impressive. Very, very fast. All right, moving on to the next question. Which management platforms does Cloud Manager SaaS Inline sync policy with? Hoping we got this one right. Even I know this one, Sean. Thanks. Congratulations, guys. 42 of you getting that right, which is brilliant. Let's have a look at the leaderboard. Alex taking top spot. Good work. Question 4. Are we ready? True or false? SaaS Inline requires the use of CDL to populate the reports of access SaaS applications. Okay, 50 people voted with nearly everybody. A couple have fallen asleep. Wow. All right. The answer is true. We do need Cortex Data Lake to feed the policy engine with the application discovery data. So thank you for that. Congratulations to the 32. Let's see what it's did to the leaderboard. Oh, Bode. Good result there, but Alex still leading the charge. Okay, the final question. Question 5. SaaS Inline is one component of data security. What are the additional components called? A tricky one, Sean.
Well, can't make them all easy, Chris. I do like how, though, so far, the fastest to answer has been someone called Vroom.
Oh, wow, that was a tricky one, that one. That was a tricky question. Well done, Sean. It's a good one. Caught a lot of people out. 16 of you got that one correct. So SSPM, SaaS API, and DLP are what form the components of data security within the CASB. Okay, moving on then. So actually, we're not moving on. That is the last question. So we are not going to show the leaderboard. But from myself and the Palo Alto team, thank you so much for spending time with us. We will be announcing the winners of this quiz next week. The winners from this week will be in touch. Deepak, we announced the winners of the first quiz at the very beginning of this of the webinar. I would love to tell you who it is, but I don't have it handy. But it's a great tip for next week, where I'll represent the winners at the end of this session. But those people who did win last week will be notified, and obviously we'll send out the prizes. So we'll announce the winners next week on Stamatis's session around the evolution of IPS. So again, thank you from the Palo Alto team. Thank you for everyone making this possibility. Thank you to Sean for pulling this content together, and Euron for supporting. And we look forward to speaking to you next week. Thanks very much.